and his nice wife, and we're going to just talk to Herb a few minutes. This is August 25th, the Friday in 1989, and hi, Herb.
How are you, Joe?
No, all right. Hey, we go back quite a ways, and we didn't even know it. You know it?
That's right.
First time, yeah. The first time I saw you that I knew you as Stubbs' dad was when he brought you down to the show one night, and I said, "Good God, is that your dad?" And Stubbs said, "Yeah, that's my dad." I said, "Shoot, we used to play rodeo and horses together." Tell me, how far back can you remember about your dad and mom? Can you remember long before they was married and where they came from?
Well, the history of them, yes, they come from Tennessee. My folks did, settled in below Chestnut Ridge in the Cook Holler. My mother's folks did. My dad's folks, they lived on Bull Creek up until Meadows and Blue feud there. And then they scattered out, and some went to Taney County, some to Stone County, and my grandmother and my dad homesteaded the place here on Logan Ridge. They proved up on the homestead in 1889, and I finally got a hold of the old home place and divided it in between two of my children. My oldest girl lives on half, and Stubb Meadows lives on the east half of the old home place.
Is this the home place?
No, it's up where Stubb lives.
It's up where Stubb lives.
Yeah.
Is the old home place.
That's right. That's the old homestead.
Yeah.
And I have the homestead deed with Grover Cleveland's name on it. It's the president had to sign the original homestead deed, and we had that.
How many acres was that homestead?
Homestead plot is 160 acres, 440s. You had to live on it and improve it for 5 years before it was deeded to you.
Yeah. How much was land worth back then?
Well, not very much. No, I asked my dad, of course it's in the hill country, and I asked him why I didn't get up in the flatlands and get him a good farm. He said it wasn't done that way back then. He said you hunted a big spring and then cleaned up enough land to grow your bread and you killed your meat. And that's the way they made a living.
Yeah.
In that day and time.
So he picked out what he thought was the most productive to live on.
Right. He chose a big spring and then developed his farm around it.
You said you divided some of your land between the kids. How many kids have you got?
I've got 5.
Who are they?
Dean Meadows and Herbert Eugene Meadows, my second boy, called Stubb, and Sidney Meadows, and Connie Roussel, and Reba Burke.
And how many grandkids you got?
I've got 17 grandchildren and 5 great-grandchildren.
5 great-grandchildren.
Yes.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good life work right there, ain't it?
Yeah, pretty good chore.
You remember when your dad and mom got? You know where they met? Your dad and mom?
Well, no, not for sure. They were both raised in the same community. The Cook Holler. My mother's maiden name was Cook, and she was raised in the Cook Holler on the Christian and Taney County line.
That's Cook Holler.
Right.
Now this place here is known as Logan Ridge.
Right.
You know where that name came from?
Yes. There was some people settled in here by the name of Logan. Mike Logan was a probate judge at Ozark for many years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, when you was a young boy, where were you born?
Right here on Logan Ridge, just a mile north of here.
Just a mile north of your home where you're living
right
now?
Yes.
Up close to where Stubb lived.
Well, that's the place I'm born and raised on. Just the old homestead place there.
How was your childhood as you remember it? Was things kind of rough back then?
Rough and tight.
Rough and tight.
Was. You bet. You raised what you eat and eat what you raised.
Right.
This money was scarce. Yes.
There wasn't much money then, was there?
No, there wasn't. Everybody worked a little, and we made a living on that 160 acres. My dad didn't work out on a job. He raised his vegetables and his corn. He had always raised white corn, and we had a little old grist mill you had to turn by hand, and we ground our meal.
What kind of animals were there on that land up there that you used for meat?
Well, we raised our own meat in hogs, and of course we couldn't butcher a beef because there was no deep freezes back in that time, or no lockers. In fact, there was no electricity through here at all. That was, you could cure your pork, but the beef, you couldn't keep it.
Couldn't keep it.
No.
You kind of had to eat it as you'd kill anything. You just kind of had to.
Yeah.
Eat it.
If we butchered a beef, we distributed it out through the neighbors, and then when they butchered, they gave us.
Now, how many brothers and sisters have you got?
Well, originally there was 10 of us children. Now then, there's 4 gone. There's 6 of us left.
What, did you have chores you had to do when you was a kid at home? Y'all had chores to do?
Oh, of course we had chores. We all done the milking, milked the cows. Now, back at that time, we fenced our fields and cropped our fields, and there was no stock law. You run your cattle on the range.
It's just open range? And
yes, hogs and cattle too.
And you had to round them up when you wanted them?
Yeah, a good stock dog was worth his weight in gold, because he'd go get them.
Yeah. Is that so you've been riding horses and doing that kind of stuff all your life, haven't you?
Always, you bet.
When did you first get interested in doing some rodeoing and roping and so on, or competition?
Well, I was grown before I started the rodeo in the rodeo business. Gene Blue and I started at the same time. We got to watch and went to Springfield to the big fair when we were just kids, and we watched them rope and ride and so on, and we really got took up with it.
You like that, huh?
You bet.
Hey, before I get into that,
I always liked a horse. A good horse was my favorite animal.
Well, back then, a good horse was like owning a big fine car now, only it was a lot more personal touch to it. You raised your own horse and made him like you wanted him.
Right.
Yeah.
You bet.
Before I get too far in there, was way back there somewhere, was there a feud between the Blues and the Meadows or something?
Oh yeah. Yes. They married backwards and forwards, the Blues and the Meadowses, but Bud and Steve got into it over 700 rails. 700
rails.
Yeah. Bud, he owned the rails, and Steve was supposed to keep the fence up. Well, they got into it over it, and it led to a killing. Bud killed Steve and Pete and Jimmy.
How'd he kill them?
Winchester.
Winchester 30-30 or something?
Yeah, I don't know what caliber it was, but they had quite a feud, and the Blues had pistols and shotguns. They was shooting at him, but they wasn't in his range. He killed 3 of them.
Killed 3 of them.
And they sentenced him to 10 years, and then gave him a pardon. So he didn't do any time.
Didn't do any time over.
And they was then Len's Blue. He was janitor at the Ozark Courthouse for several years. He killed Frank Tabor. Frank Tabor was implicated in the feud himself, and he was more or less the instigator that kept things riled up and going.
Yeah.
And so Len's killed him, and that about ended it because they all moved out away from each other after that.
Was some of that time during the time of the Ball Knobbers, or was there any of that clan in the Ball Knobbers?
Yes, it was back about the time of the Ball Knobbers' reign. It happened in the 1880s. Yes.
Well, the ball knobbers today is a little more friendly, aren't they?
Yes, they're
which even your boys are part of the ball knobbers now. Now, getting back to the rodeo, and you had what was the best horse you think you ever had?
The best calf horse I ever had was a little brown horse that come out of Falls, Texas. He had been worked on the range and had big cattle roped off of him. There was no way you could slip behind him with a loose rope. He kept his head to you at all times. And he run a calf just like a dog run a rabbit. I mean, he'd lay his ears back and look for him. He was sure a good horse. It's just like standing on the ground roping a fence post. He gauged him right. I showed off of him 7 years.
7 years.
But I never owned him.
Never owned him. Who owned him?
Fellow that had a big ranch at Falls, Texas. I fed cattle for him. They had drought out down there in the early 50s, and I tried to buy him. Back at that time, I offered him $500 for him, and that is equivalent of $5,000 this day.
Yeah, at least.
But anyway, he was an outstanding individual, and he wouldn't sell him to him because he said he was a keepsake. So, but he told me to just to take him and use him like he was mine, and I kept him for 7 years, and finally times got a little better and the weather got better, and they all went back to Texas while he come and got him.
Come and got him.
Yes.
Bet you hate to see him go.
Oh,
didn't you?
Man, yes.
Did you used to break your own horses sometime?
Oh, yes. We broke our own horses. Me and the two oldest boys, after they got up big enough, well, we showed together, and we raised different horses from colts up. I had a big blue roan horse. He was an outstanding athlete, and he was a running horse. He was a Wagner horse, come off the ranch down in Oklahoma that raised purebred Wagner quarter horses. He was an outstanding individual, a good athlete. He held his feet awful well. Yeah.
You get pretty close and pretty well acquainted with one when you work with him that much, don't you?
You know him.
You know
him.
They know each other.
Yes.
He knew you too.
Yes, I could handle him, but very few people could. He had an awful sensitive mouth. I'd back him in and shoot and just rub his neck and talk to him, and he'd stand pat for me, but if you touched that mouth, he'd go straight up. He was an awful sensitive mouth on him, and you had to know how to handle him or you're in trouble.
Yeah, yeah. Your main thing was calf roping. Did you try your hand at some bronc riding and bull riding or any of that kind of stuff?
No, I didn't. The roping was, and then get in the wild cow milking. Of course, that was the roping too, and
can you think of a funny or a humorous story or an accident or something kind of unusual back in your younger rodeo days?
Yeah, Tom Stanford produced rodeos, had the best string of bulls that anybody in this country ever saw. He wanted every bull to throw every rider that got on him, and he always kept a running set of calves. He wanted every calf he owned to outrun every cowboy that chased him, and he had outstanding style. But one thing I remember about it, he had an old fellow with him named Tex Collins, and his wife was named Pearl, and they had a bull whip-act. He cut a cigarette out of her mouth, one of them 30-foot bull whips, or plucked the combs out of her hair, and also had a knife thrown deep. But Tom let him have a tent there by the side of the arena, and it said, "Horned rattlesnakes from Borneo," advertising. And Sure enough, he had great big rattlesnakes, 2 of them, and they had horns in the tops of their head. Well, me and Tex got to be good friends. He was an old fellow, and I was just a kid, and we got to be good friends. And I said, "Now, Tex, them rattlesnakes didn't come, Barney. Oh, where'd you get them?" He said, "I'm just old Texas diamondback rattlesnakes that I put the horns on them."
He put the horns on.
Yeah. He told me how he done it. He said, "I took rooster spurs. I cut long spurs off a rooster's leg, and I split the hide on that snake's head, and I grafted it into that snake's head, set it on there, and taped and sewed that skin back on that snake's head, and when it healed, them horns was set on top of his head, the rooster spurs." But said, "Don't tell it." Said, "I'm making money."
Well, yeah, he's making money.
Yeah, 10 cents back then. A dime was big as a wagon wheel. 10 cents to go see them horned rattlesnakes from Borneo, see?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was a makeshift.
Did you ever have any? Did you ever have a kind of a bad accident or a wreck when you was roping?
No, I was very fortunate. I slipped a knee out of joint one time. I had bought a racehorse out of Enid, Oklahoma, and making a calf horse out of him, and he was run happy. And I come off of him up at the fair in Springfield. I roped the calf and come down off of him, and he failed to stop. Sometimes he'd do that. And I jammed the knee up, coming off hitting the ground. But other than that, I done pretty good. Another episode I kind of want to tell you about. They were in one of these rodeos that Jack Rom come into this country. Buff Lamb and them boys come in here with him. And he had a outstanding rodeo. And he had 3 people that could take 22s and shoot chimes and play a tune. They'd shoot 22 shorts. And these chimes like you pick with them little hammers. Well, they'd hit them and could play a religious tune. And this girl, she'd ride out in the arena on a horse, and they'd throw up a chalk ball the size of a golf ball, and she'd plug them with that 22. Well, I thought that was outstanding marksmanship. I didn't know just how that is done, because sitting on that horse would be pretty awkward to hit them little balls way up in the air. So I asked her. I complimented her about her shooting, and she said, "Well, it's easier than you think. I'm shooting bird shot."
Shooting bird shot.
Sure. See, there's tricked a lot of it.
Tricked all trade, didn't there?
Yeah. Yeah, quite a bit.
Can you remember maybe what was the fastest time that you've ever? Can you remember?
Of myself?
Yourself roping. What was your fastest time that you ever remember you had?
Well, I won the Clever Show one time in 9/8.
9/8.
Yeah, 9 8/10 seconds.
That's pretty fast.
Well, it was for me. My regular natural time averaged probably in 11 and 12.
That's pretty good, isn't it?
Well,
That's
yes.
Pretty good average for an old country boy down here on Logan Ridge, isn't it?
Yes, I matched a fellow that was up in the top echelon of the ropers. Come from Texas. But I was kind of young and foolish. I thought if he was better than me, I wanted to see, you know. So I drove to Stockton and matched Carol Brumley. 10 Ks, $10 a K. Back then, pretty high.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah. Well, Ivan Johnson at Marinville furnished the caves, and he hauled them up there. Well, we roped 5 caves, and then it was awful hot, and we said, let's cool our horses, and then we roped the other 5. We was pretty close at that time. I was leading him just a little. Well, I loosened the tackleberry on the side of my saddle and let my horse breathe. I had a good black horse, quarter horse. Well, they said, let's go. And I forgot to tighten the tackleberry on the side. You know, a tackleberry, there's great hooks in it, and it pulls up. Well, I just stepped up on one of the saddle hadn't turned, but it didn't. I backed him in the chute. The boy said when I left the chute, the blankets went off from under my saddle, but I roped my calf pretty good shape. never looked back to see what happened. Went on and tied him down and looked up. And there stood my old pony, that saddle again, his neck rope, and standing there holding it. Well, Carol Bromley's dad was a man with a little age on him, and he said, "Son, you may never be world's champion, but one thing about you, you've got a broke horse."
You got a broke horse.
Yeah. Well, I bested him. I beat him on 10 calves, but he missed one loop, and I roped all 10. So I beat him. He probably had a horse he give $2,500, and back then that's an outstanding price.
That'd be worth how much today?
Probably
50,000, 20, 30, 40, 50,000.
20,000 or better, I expect. But
Where did you used to go when you was out roping? And where would you go? Some of the towns.
Local? Well, I rodeoed across Arkansas and Oklahoma and Illinois, some in Iowa, Missouri, and some in Kansas. If you went east, well, it was a lot better, north or east. When you got in stiff competition, when you went south or west,
Is that
the
right?
boys was old cowboys in that country.
Yeah, there's kind of second nature to them.
You bet, and they had outstanding horses. The average roper will go by the pay window once in a while if he's got an extra good horse. That good horse makes a world of difference.
Yeah. Tell me about that. Tell me about that good horse that was Dewey Combs had. Was they
Benny and Willard Combs.
Willard Combs?
Yeah, Baby Doll.
Baby Doll.
Yes, she had over $1 million run off of her back. She was a dogging horse. She's a little sour mare with a blazed face, and she was well trained. And she fell over at a rodeo with a heart attack and died.
Oh, I was there. Napa, Idaho.
Yeah.
I was there with the
And they
Ozark Jubilee.
shipped her back to Oklahoma. They thought enough of her. They brought her back to Oklahoma and buried her in the middle of their arena.
Is that
Oklahoma.
right?
Yes.
So well, that's interesting. When did you get interested in playing the fiddle?
Oh, I was interested all my life in that ever since I can remember. My dad was an outstanding country fiddler. He won a $20 gold piece back in the 20s when I can first remember at the Shrine Mosque, at an old fiddler's contest. They had it at the Shrine Mosque, and he won a $20 gold piece. I remember it was about the size of a half a dollar. You know, he showed me. Back then, that was before gold was illegal to have.
Uh-huh.
And he paid him a $20 gold piece, and then he won a $10 gold piece at the YMCA. He was an outstanding contest fiddler.
Well,
But he was awful particular with his fiddle. If one of the kids planked strings on him, he was in trouble. He didn't let you fool with his fiddle. That is off limits. Well, I got me a fiddle when I was about 14. My cousin was a carpenter, and he was tearing down an old house in Kansas. And he found a fiddle under the ceiling against the wall. But it'd come unglued, but it's the only one I ever seen like it. It was a Stainer fiddle.
Stainer.
You know, it's stamped on the back, said Stainer. It's a black fiddle with a red cast to it. And it come unglued. Well, I took it, he gave it to me. And I took it and had it glued to the back. Jim K-Singer glued it for me. And it had the best tone on the two fine strings I about ever hear. Well, my dad wanted me to get a guitar and second for him, so finally Jim K-Singer traded me a Gibson guitar for it, but I wished I'd have kept it. I've never seen one like it since.
It was probably a
fiddle.
real rare fiddle.
And no telling how long it'd been in that old house.
That's right.
You know, it's under the wall ceiling, under the sheetrock.
Well, I was one. You got your guitar, then when did you get you another fiddle?
Well, my dad bought me one. he gave me one, and of course he said he's going to give me his old fiddle, but he kind of promised out to each one of us boys his 4 hours.
Yeah, yeah.
You know.
Well, you can understand that.
But finally, my kid brother wound up with his old fiddle. When he was 13 years old, he was born in 1876. Guess he'd be 113 now if he'd be alive, you know. But his mother, my grandmother, bought him a fiddle in the pawn shop in Springfield for $10. And that was a big price at that time. And is a Stradivarius copy. And when he was 13 years old.
And he played fiddle?
Always.
Did your other brothers and so on play fiddles? Or?
My younger brother could play some. I was about the only one that played. They could all play a guitar second, but people would come for miles to get my dad to go play for dancing platforms at these picnics.
Yeah.
Square dance. Play all night.
Oh yeah.
10 cents a set. I got a nickel for second.
You got a nickel for second for it.
Yeah, on the guitar. I'd whip that guitar till my wrists would hurt, you know, all night.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Now they lasted longer then.
Oh yeah.
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 Where'd you meet this pretty lady sitting on the couch over here?
Well, we're pretty close.
Be careful now.
Neighbors, I suppose. She lived about 7 or 8 miles from where I was raised, where she was raised. And how come met up with her was at a pie supper. I bought her pie at a pie supper one night.
Yeah.
And made a date with her, and we courted and married after that.
How much did you give for that pie back then? Do you remember?
75 cents. 75
well,
cents.
You must have thought she was awful pretty. 75 cents for a pie back then.
Yeah, we was married in 1940.
1940. How many kids did you all have?
5.
And you had you named them a while ago.
Yeah.
Those 5 kids.
Yeah.
Do you remember who were some of the guys around here that you used to ride and rodeo with?
Well, Gene Blue me and him traveled together for a good many years, and Gale Noon, he lives here at Ozark, and Russell Chaffin, and of course the Hedgepeth boys from Nixie was some of them, and Jeff Chandler from Hartville, and Eamon Short from over at Marshfield, and Charlie Allred, he was a commission man at Springfield, and Gene Pike and Bud Martin, and I could name dozens of Don Ellison. And when I first started, good horses was scarce, good running horses. If you had a horse that catch fast calf, it was unusual in this part of the country. Charlie Allred had a good registered quarter horse, and Dwight Dennis had a good registered quarter horse. And that was about the only full-bloods there was in this part of the country.
Huh.
They was scarce. Of course, now good horses, there's a lot of them.
Well,
everybody rides a racehorse this time.
They're bred with the racehorse.
You bet.
Back when you was fiddling, did you go play any contests yourself?
No, I didn't. We used to have music parties. And
kitchen sweat.
You bet. And I played for a few square dances and things like that. But my dad went to a lot of contests, and I second for him. The last contest he played in, we come in 3rd at Nixie, and he was 84 years old.
84.
Yes.
Do you remember whether or not he ever played a fiddler's contest up on Commercial Street in Springfield at the community building?
I really don't know if he did or not. He had a chance to go with the Weaver brothers in Elvari at one time, but he just didn't want to be away from home.
You remember seeing the Weaver brothers in Elvari?
No.
You never did watch them?
I've seen them on motion pictures.
Yeah.
Was all. But seeing them individual, he knew them individually. They come from in north of Ozark there, and they had a home just south of Springfield, there on James River.
Yeah.
They were one of the pioneer movie makers of their time.
When you was going around to some of these rodeo places, did they ever play a little poker now and then in some of them places?
Oh yeah, we had a game or two now and then. I pulled into Pierce City, and my old car had an old Cadillac, and it looked like a white steamer. I mean, is a boiling the steamer fly. Well, I had to have a radiator rotted out, so I went up and paid my entry fee for the calf roping, and took that down to a radiator shop. Then I got in the poker game. Me, Dick Fox, and several of the cowboys back at that time, good friends, but they were kind of rowdy people sometimes. But I got my radiator paid for, my entry fee paid for, and come home with $150 more than started with, and I missed my calf.
Mr. Calf.
Yeah.
So you must.
So I had pretty good luck.
You must have had pretty good game.
Yeah.
Yeah. That. Can you remember any funny stories that happened in some of them poker games? I know sometimes there's funny stories that go along with some of them.
Yeah. An old boy lived over there at Mount Vernon, and he said, Herb, as a calf roper, you're not as much as I thought you ought to be, but he said you're sure a pretty good poker player. he was one of the losers, you know. But always enjoyed the companionship and of the buddies. Cowboys are pretty close-knit people. They take up for each other.
Yeah.
One of the funny stories that I remember was back pretty early while I was in Jay, Oklahoma at a rodeo, and we was all bunking down in these green leaf hotels. Nobody stayed in the cabin. We just took our bedrolls and threw them down wherever we took a notion to sleep. Well, that's when these hippies and yippies first started coming in. Long hair, no shoes, and headbands and what have you. Well, a couple of old cowboys had been a-drinking a little, and they hadn't put their horse up yet, and a van full of them come into town, and they had a pair of them old long clippers run off the batteries that you sheared your horses made. Well, they got to roping them hippies and sharing their hair. Ron Wayne Kerrigan and Cato Mays was two of the main characters in that. And finally the law come up there and got them boys and threw them in jail, but they turned them out the next morning.
Turned them away the next morning.
Yeah, but there's some bald-headed hippies left out of there.
When did you remember the first car you ever had? When did you get your first car?
Oh, when I was 18 years old. I bought a Model A, and the radiator leaked on it, but it run pretty good. I give $15 for it. And I put new tires on it, and a tar and tube cost me $7. And I put 4 on it. I was in the CC camps at that time.
Whereabouts?
I was at Shell Knob for quite a while, and then I moved on into Bearville, Arkansas. And then the next car I bought was a 32 Plymouth, and the motor mount was on rubber. And when it's idling, the motor would shake. But it was slick, leather upholstering, chrome plated, had 2 tar wells in the front fenders, one tar in each fender, and had 6 new tires on it. And there's a convertible with a rumble seat. Run like new money. I give $65 for it, and people talk about what a skinning I got.
Yeah.
Buying that car.
Would probably be worth
Why it'd be worth-
15,000 now.
Oh, yeah.
Had double spare.
Yeah. I had 6 new tires on it. I give $65 for it.
Would
Well-
you buy another one for 65?
I had to go to service. Then I was drafted. That was in 41. I had to go to the Army, and I was drafted. Well, I traded that car then for a cow and a calf and a sow and 7 pigs and $15 in money. So I come out pretty good.
You come out pretty good.
Yeah.
You went. You say you went in the Army?
Yeah, in 41.
Where'd you go first in the Army? Boot camp or whatever?
I didn't think I wanted to go to the infantry, so me and a boy, Roy Johnson, lived right here in the Christian County. We was first two about it, drafted out of Christian County. Well, we thought we'd get out of that infantry, and we signed up for the cavalry. Well, they sent him Fort Riley, Kansas, put him on a horse, and they sent me to Fort Lewis, Washington, and I was in the mechanized cavalry.
Mechanized.
Yeah, I drove a armored car there, weighed something over 6 tons. It had heavy armor all the way around it, and it was the first 4-wheel drive I ever saw. It was a 4-wheel drive. You saw the pictures of these half tracks. Well, instead of having a half track, it had 4 wheels, and it had 2 30 caliber machine guns, water cooled, and then it had a 50 caliber for aircraft mounted on a race on there. I'll never forget one of those colonels got up and made us all a speech. Said, take care of your vehicles. Said, you're going to live in them, and some of you's going to die in them. One little fella said, makes me think I'm riding in a damn hearse. It was.
I forgot to ask you, what year was you born in?
1918.
1918.
September the 25th, 1918.
Do you remember the boys going off the war then in World War I?
No, I was born the year that World War I was over. It was over in 1918.
Yeah.
And then World War II come along, why everybody that was warm had to go. But we got out of it. Pretty lucky.
You remember rodeo clown by the name of Slim Pickens?
Oh yes. He performed back in my early time. Him and Casey Tibbs was the champion saddle bronc rider, and Toots Mansfield was a world's champion calf roper, and Slim Pickens was one of the best clowns I ever saw.
Yeah.
He was a big man, and when they had the wild cow milking, everybody wanted Slim to mug for him, because when he caught one, he didn't go any further. He could sure hold him. Yeah. Rex Allen, he was at Springfield at the fair, and he rode a big chocolate-colored stud with a white mane and tail he called Coco, and he had an individual and a big trailer, and this fellow that took care of his horse stayed in that trailer with him. He took care of it. He took care of that horse. He sung the song "The Streets of Laredo" there, and then after the show was over, why, he got a fiddle and come around behind the chutes there and fiddle and guitar, and he was a tremendous singer and a guitar picker, but he wasn't any better fiddler than I was. Me and him, I'd play a while and he'd second, and he'd play a while and I'd second, but we did have a good time. And another celebrity bunch that I had the privilege of playing with was the Willis Boys, Guy and Vic and Skeeter. And I got to perform with them at Pittsburgh at one time. They had a rodeo there, and they loved those rodeos. Of course, none of them could do anything, but they were good musicians.
Now you didn't know this, but when you was out at the fairgrounds out there at Springfield, I was with Rex Allen then. I played rhythm guitar, and at that rodeo, he was doing the what was it? The hula hoop boogie or something like that. And he had Coco there, and Roger Blevins and I played 2 or 3 of the shows, and then we had Bill Fritchett played accordion on some of them. But I remember we rolled in the fairgrounds out there. We was in Rex's car, and we come in west of the grandstand where you used to come in there, and turned out on the racetrack, and there's about 100 people in the grandstand. And Rex said, "Well, you can sure as hell tell we're in Springfield. There ain't nobody here." Now I remember. I remember this trainer's name. In fact, that very year, I've got a picture of this trainer and Coco, and my youngest son, and Rex Allen Jr. was with him at that time out there. He was with him. He was just a teenage boy, and him and my boy, they had a bunch of cars out in the midway, out in the field out there that they was going to use kind of in a demolition type derby. They was going to use them in the stunts.
Yeah.
And they put just a little bit of gas in them, and my boy and Rex Allen Jr. got out there, and they'd start them old cars, and they'd run around till they run out of gas, and they'd just leave them parked. They had cars parked all over that infield out there where they'd run the gas out of them, and them guys come around there, and they said, "What's all these cars doing out here?" This one guy said, "Well, I caught a couple of kids out here driving them around. They run the gas out of them." So they had to go around all them cars, put some gas in them so they could start them up and use them. I remember you was roping out there at the fairgrounds a time or two when I was out there doing some things.
Yeah, I roped there. One time we was at the show there. It's the RCA show, and we had to give our address to Springfield before we could get in because we didn't have an RCA card. At that time, we were just kind of beginners, but luck kindly helps out a fellow once in a while because the world's best was there. Buck and Just Goodspeed was there, and Orban Garrett was there, and Buddy Mays, and Glenn Harp, and Ray Kilgore, the top ropers of the world, was there. Well, Bub Crow, just a kid from Miami, Oklahoma, he won it, and I come in third. We beat the world's best at the Springfield Fair. But it was lucky, We had the breaks, maybe.
Well, that happens a lot of times in a lot of stuff. If you get a little bit of a break, it sure does pay off.
I never will forget us riding a little brown Texas horse. Outstanding individual, but they're giving people rides in a helicopter there, and it like scared that little horse to death. He'd just squat and squeal and look up at that helicopter. None of the other horses paying much attention to it at all, but it really scared that little man.
Well, I saw him.
he'd just get low to the ground and just nicker.
Well, I saw him.
Finally they quit.
Do you remember when they had the Springfield story up there at the fairgrounds? Was you in on that?
Springfield what?
The Springfield story. There was a fella come in through town, and he promoted the Springfield story. They held it out there at the fairgrounds and on the racetrack out in front of the grandstand. And Gene Pike and Carl Harper and me and a whole bunch of the ones that built that little rodeo arena out there on Division, we was in this Springfield story, and what this was, they told a story of the growth of Springfield, and they had on one scene they had a stagecoach come in from the east side and is running down through there, and they had 2 riders with them, and they stopped, and the passengers got off and some got on, and they switched teams. Well, when they took the horses off, they put a team of mules in there to finish the rest of their journey, and they started out and they hit them mules and the excitement of the people, and them mules run off. Well, me and one of the other guys was the outriders, and we rode clear down the west end of that racetrack before they ever caught them mules and get that stagecoach stopped. Then on another scene, they had a war between the North and the South.
Yeah.
And one group of riders come in from one side and one the other side, and they met out in the center. And they're supposed to have a mock battle.
Yeah.
Well, we rehearsed this thing out there 2 or 3 days. We done a little figure 8 thing where they crossed, and we rehearsed this battle scene. And Carl Harper was one that was supposed to get hit and fall off his horse. He was a colonel, and somebody else, and I can't remember those names right now. But anyway, the night of the show, the first night of the show, always all excited. And here come this battle scene. And always during the practice, they was playing a record of guns going off.
Yeah.
And so the night of the story, here we come out there, and we met out in the middle of the ring, and they started this record. But to make it a little bit more exciting, this producer took a handful of them firecrackers and lit them and throwed them out there under them horses while they was all ganged up there together. Now you talk about a rodeo. We had a rodeo. Carl Harper, he got off his horse a little bit early because that old horse he had thrown him,
unloaded him,
and it was real dusty. You couldn't see a thing. So I just held on to saddle horn. I had a little old mare that was really a 5-gated mare, but she couldn't do a couple of gates, so I turned her into a pleasure horse. And boy, that like to scared her to death. And I just held on to saddle horn and reins, and when she got through, I was way down on the west end of the arena. She took off and went running, Well, this one guy, he had a real fancy horse, and I wish I could think of the names right now, but anyway, we kept the horses out there in the barn because this story went on for 2 nights. And they put her horses in the barns down there that night. The next morning he went out there and his horse was dead. She'd had a heart attack. She was real high strung, and when they throwed all them firecrackers out there, it excited her, and they said she had a heart attack. But I'll tell you now, we really had us a rodeo.
I went to Marshall, Arkansas one time. It was a kind of an interesting story at a rodeo. Odie Owens from Joplin was show producer, and there was 72 calf ropers in it. It'd been raining for a week, and the mud was, it'd come halfway to your knees. Horse couldn't run in it, calf couldn't run in it. Cowboys just get sucked under pretty near. Well, I was riding Gene Blue's rope horse, Old Dutch. He was a mudder. He sure could run the mud. And they turned my calf out, and the arena was built in the bottom where there's a baseball diamond. And just my calf across the pitcher's mound, I put the twine on it. It was on a dry place in the arena. I won it with 13 seconds, beat 72 ropers. Big spot I ever won in my life, $1,080.
$1,080.
Yeah.
Well, I swung.
But sea luck was with me. Yeah. Just across that pitcher's mound is high. So I roped him, and I had him in the only dry place in the arena.
Yep. That's what it takes sometimes, some luck. Accomplished old-time fiddle player.
Yes, he was.
How many tunes you think he knew?
Well, him and my older sister got to writing them down as he remembered them, and each one that he could play, and took them several days to come up with all these tunes. It was something over 200 tunes by memory.
Well, that's a lot of songs then.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's the name to sum up?
Well, Tennessee Wagner and Billy in the Lowland and Negro Fever and the Cornfield Canary and the Gray Eagle and he could play the Forked Deer, and he could play, I don't know, Knocking at the Door, Patty on the Turnpike. I could name, if they'd come to memory quick, a lot of them, all right enough. But the Devil's Dream, he won the Fiddler's Contest at the Shrine Mosque, I believe it was, with the Devil's Dream. YMCA.
Walking on John.
Yeah.
Did he win some money or what?
A $20 gold piece.
You told about that a while ago.
Yeah, he won a $20 gold piece.
What was some? Could you play? Did you learn to play those tunes that he knew?
quite a few of them. Of course, I never could play near so many as he could, but I could play the Wagner and Paddy on the Turnpike and Walk Along John, Leather Breeches, and Blue Mule, and some of those tunes. Yeah.
Now,
I learned them off of him. Yeah. But no two fiddlers plays a tune just exactly like.
Right.
You use a different lick with a bow. Coming down from Denver.
That's one of your
my
favorites.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Now them fancy fiddlers back then, they used to play a lot of hokum.
Yeah.
Remember playing hokum? Nowadays they call it jazz.
Yeah. Hope Weatherman was one of the better. We called him a classic fiddler at that time.
I played with him many times.
And his dad, Sam Weatherman, he played in contests with my dad a lot. He played, he had two of his fingers on, and he played in B flat and F a lot because it's easier to note with his fiddle. Yeah.
Did you ever know Clay Galbraith?
Oh yeah, Art Gilbert.
Clay and Art?
I played with Art.
Now, I don't know what, I ran onto Art about 3 weeks ago, he and his wife up the cafeteria, and he said if nothing happened, to let him know, and he's coming to the Herb Meadows picnic and music party the first Sunday after Mother's Day this next year.
Well, I'll be glad to see him. Yeah, he's a good fiddler.
You know, we started this thing this last year, first Sunday after Mother's Day, and we proclaimed that Herb Meadows Picnic and Music Party Day.
Right.
And we come out to your house here, me and Bob Leftrich and Lacey, I can't think of his name, and my cousin B, and we out here. We had a good time that day.
We sure did.
We had a good time.
Yeah.
This next year, we're planning on doing a lot of things. We're going to have a covered dish lunch, this next year.
Yeah.
And I'm going to check on it here this pretty soon. And I think we're going to try to rent the community building where we'll be in the shade and be cool, and we're going to have lots of fun and lots of music and lots of good time. And I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, me too.
Yeah, I like that. Well, Herman,
you said you knew Hope Weatherman and played with him. Well, his dad was an outstanding fiddler, and back in the early days, things wasn't quite as civilized as they are today. And sometimes at the picnics, the boys would get a little too much beverage, and then the fight started, Well, Sam had a brother named John, and John Weatherman. And him and Clem Bostick got into a fight at the picnic on Bull Creek. And Clem, he beat John up pretty bad. So they put him out under a shade of a tree there, and they kind of washing him up. And Clem went back out there and went to kicking his ribs in. Well, Sam was fiddling for the platform, and he come off of there. And he took a Barlow knife and cut both jugular veins square in two in Clem Bostick's throat. He cut his head off. And there was two doctors, Dr. Young and Dr. Wade, was both there at the picnic. And they sewed his head back on and he lived.
Well.
Yes, sir. But till the day he died, he had a scar plumb around his neck.
I guess. Was you there?
No.
You wasn't there?
Before my time.
That was before your time.
Yes. Yeah, that was 75, 80 years ago. But they had some bad fights sometimes at those picnics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I learned to play a little bit of fiddle from Ho, but I used to go over to his house and he'd come over to my house. And of course, I liked to hear him play fiddle so well that I'd second for him. And he'd play, and boy, I really liked to play with Ho. But then when I was learning to play bass fiddle, and I was in high school, my folks used to be with a bunch of people that always got a bunch of square dance parties and music parties, and a lot of times they'd hold them down at Idlewild. And have you ever played at Idlewild?
No.
Well, there's a little old cabin there on the almost down where the city utilities plant is there on Lake Springfield, and this little cabin was right there on the railroad track, and they used to get Clay and Hobe, and of course I'd play bass with them.
Yeah.
Had a big old German-made bass, but when Hobe would play fiddle, and then when he'd start getting tired, he'd have Clay play fiddle, and he'd play rhythm guitar.
Yeah.
Well, at any time he wanted to, he'd just hook that pick under a string, he'd just break it, he'd just snap that string.
Yeah.
Then it'd take him 20 minutes to put on a new string. That way he got the rest of all. He never was too work brittle.
No, he wasn't.
He didn't like to work too well.
He had an older brother, Keith Sweatherman, that was an outstanding guitar man. He could play that Bluebells of Scotland, and he was a guitar picker. He could make some of the prettiest music on a guitar of any man I ever listened to play. He was outstanding guitar man.
I never did know him.
No, he was older. He was older than Hobe, but those people were musicians.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, he was outstanding.
Who's this now?
My wife?
Oh, your wife,
Yeah.
folks?
They were in Idaho, Twin Falls, Idaho. Wasn't it Twin Falls where you played?
Harry Musgrave program.
Yeah, and they played for General Motors on the Harry Musgrave program. Now, she had a younger brother, right curly-headed little feller, like Welford County, only his hair was red. And he could play a fiddle. And then, you may have remembered J.H. up here. Well, he played guitar for him, and Lily and Mary and them boys, they sang on the Harry Musgrave show, sponsored by General Motors on the radio.
That was in Idaho?
Yeah, 39, wasn't it, Mom? Yeah, 39.
I'm going to talk to you. I'm going to talk to your wife here a minute, and you can listen.
All right.
She may tell something on you that you didn't want to tell me.
Well, it'll be all right.
Did you play an instrument?
No, I didn't play. Just one tune I could pick on the guitar.
Did you sing?
Yeah, I sang.
You sang. They tell me you can still sing.
Well, no.
Huh? Now this was in Idaho. Was your family from Idaho?
No, we just went out there for about 6 months and worked.
Just went out there and worked. What kind of work did you do out there?
We picked we topped onions and pulled onions and topped beets and
Baked potatoes?
yeah, and potatoes. We picked spuds up and thinned onions, and then hops. That was our big one. We picked hops.
Yeah. When was that?
1939.
1939. How'd you go out there?
Just a car and a little trailer hooked on behind us.
What kind of car was it you went out there in? You remember?
I don't.
The soda.
Yeah.
An older soda.
Older soda. That's right.
An older soda.
Yeah.
And they don't even make them anymore.
No.
How long was you out there?
Just about 6 months. We just went out there to work for the summer.
Was that you and your family? And
Mom and Dad, and Wilford, and Mary, and me, and Billy, Janelle, and Gage.
and then you all got the job on the radio station?
We played every Saturday night.
Played every Saturday night, sponsored by
General Motors.
General Motors. What town was that in?
Twin Falls.
Twin Falls. Twin Falls, Idaho.
Idaho.
Lived in Byler. That's pretty.
And they played at school, went to schools and played, for school activities, and they played there a lot.
You remember your trip out there?
Oh yes, very much.
Anything happened on that trip that you couldn't stand again? Or
Well, yeah, one thing, I had a tooth pulled the day we left, and it got a dry socket,
Oh mercy!
and I was sick for 2 weeks on that, and didn't get to work for 2 weeks after we got out there. But then Oh, we just, a camping lots, you know. Mom, she cooked up a big old ham for us to eat, you know. And we'd stop and have, they smoked it.
Yeah.
And we'd have ham and eggs for breakfast and dinner and supper. we camped every night.
How much, you went out there to work, how much money would you make a week up there, chopping onions and picking up spuds and so on?
You know, I don't even remember, but we'd probably make, maybe all of us together, $20 a day.
$20 a day for all of you?
Probably for all of us.
Yeah. What about your trip home? You remember it?
Yeah, my brother, he bought another car. Didn't he buy this other car
Yeah,
while we was out there?
Model A.
And,
Well,
yeah, so we had 2 cars and trailer coming back, and then there was some, 1 or 2 kids come with Wilford. I forget who it was now, but there was some kids came back, rode back with him. And
How many days did it take you to go out there or come back?
I believe it was 11 going out and 5 coming back. I believe that's the way it was.
You in a hurry to get home, wasn't you?
Yeah, Dad was.
Dad was in a hurry to get home.
Yeah, we'd have stayed, but he wanted to come home.
Can you, now I know that by my wife and so on, putting up with show people and rodeo people sometimes gets to be a little bit of a chore. Is there something he's left out that he don't want to tell me? That
Well, I don't know.
nights being away from home rodeoing and playing cards and
I went with him until rodeoing until we had 5 kids. We started when Sid was born. The summer he was born is when he started. And I went with him then up till we got 5 of them. That was too many.
that's too many to take.
Yeah.
Did them boys, any of the boys kind of take up some roping and riding and so on?
my oldest boy, Dean, and Stubb, I thought they're as good as anybody. We traveled together. I began to get a little age on me, and we were pretty well mounted at all times. But the 2 oldest boys, now my youngest boy, he never cared anything about it. He wouldn't try to talk. He'd rather walk and go see about the cattle than to ride a horse. He just didn't care nothing about it. But the older 2 boys, they made outstanding ropers. Yeah.
Stubb on the Ball Knobber show down at Branson, he still does a little roping on that show. Did you know that?
Well, no.
Well, what he does is he ropes that fiddle player down there, and then that fiddle player turns around and he's got that rope kind of rosin, and he turns around and turns it upside down and plays his fiddle on that rope.
On that rope, yeah.
But Stubb he's still roping a little bit. He catches his jap once in a while.
He was an outstanding athlete and a good roper. Stubb was. Well, the oldest boy was too. They were both good athletes.
Now the oldest boy is
Dean.
Dean is the oldest boy.
Yes, and they were both good ropers. Dean, when he was 16 years old, won the Booster Club rodeo at Ozark when he was 16. He beat some outstanding ropers out of Oklahoma, and he was a good roper from then on.
Did they?
Stubb was he got in the calf scramble always. He won every calf scramble he ever got into. Back then they put some prize money in the calf scramble, $12-15, and he knowed how to rope from the time he could get around good and run and walk, and he could outrun. He was awful fleet of foot. He could sure run. And somebody asked him, said, "How come you can run so fast?" Well, Dean was his older brother. He said, "Necessity, getting away from Dean." He could outrun Dean.
Did they?
But he won every calf scramble he ever got into, and he's small for his age. And you wasn't supposed to get in there if he was over 12 years old. I think he's about 15 before he quit.
Cheated just a little bit.
Yeah.
Did they kind of break their own horses in, or they had their own horses, or?
Yeah, when we traveled together, we most of the time just pulled one horse, and all three rode it.
All three rode the same horse?
Yeah. I gave Stub the sorrel horse, and Dean the big red horse that come out of Enid, Oklahoma. And we raced the sorrel horse and trained him ourselves. And there's two boys from Fayetteville, Arkansas, his brothers, offered me $1,500 for him, and that was outstanding price. When he was 4-year-old, I told him I'd promised him the boys when I quit. And they come on to Nixie, and we had won the show at Hurley, all three prizes. They was paying 3 months. We come on to Nixie. Dean won first, and Stubb broke the barrier, and I won a third at Nixie. Well, they still tried to buy the sorrel horse, and he was a bomber colt. He was a registered quarter horse. And we come on to Ozark. Well, Dean's calf went one way to the right. He roped him, tied him down in 12-1. Stubbs' calf went to the left. He roped him, tied him down in 12 flat. My calf went straight down the arena, and I busted him so hard, he knocked him down so hard he wouldn't get up. I helped him up and tied him in 14. Well, I was out of the money, but the other two boys played. So the boys said, if you won't take $1,500 for him, price him. But I couldn't, because I promised the boys I'd give him to him. I did. And then I gave him to Stubb and Dean the bay horse. The sorrel horse was an outstanding athlete and could sure enough run. And Dean gave him 2 roping horses and $500 for the sorrel horse. And he kept him till he was 27 years old.
That's pretty old for
a horse.
An active horse like that.
Yeah. He began to fail though, and so Dean, he was kind of tender-hearted, didn't want to put him to sleep, so he let another fella have him, so he wouldn't know what happened to him.
And raising them boys, now I know all 3 of them, and they're pretty active boys. Did they give you much trouble?
No, not a great deal at all. My parents would quarrel on me, say you're going to get them boys hurt with them horses.
Yeah.
But the advantage I had, it kept them out of these roadhouses and fast cars.
Well,
I played with them from the time they was kids up.
Also, I understand you'd bust their butt if they done too much.
Well, they thought it was a little strict. I didn't think so.
He left home. He got so mad at us. He left home one night. He said, "I'm going to leave." And I said, "Okay, just get your rags and leave." So I rolled him up in a pair of overalls and a shirt, and I said, "Hit the road." And I
told him, 5 years old.
Yeah, 4 or something like that. And I said, "Just get out and go." And so he pulled out. And we had a very big old patch of buck bush out by the road, you know. So he went out there and he hid behind this buck bush. Every little bit he'd look up to see if we was going to come and get him or something. He'd look up. It was getting dark, so then I had to go make him come to the house. He left. I run him off.
He didn't go too far, did he?
No, he didn't.
I run away from home one time, and the little boy next door we played cowboys and Indians, and his dad had made him an Indian tent next door. I run off one time. I told folks they'd never see me again, and I went over there and I got in that tent. And it was in the summertime, in the daytime. Boy, I'll tell you, after I was in there about 2 or 3 hours, I was so hot. I started sweating, I got hot, and got sick, and I come home. That running off wasn't too good.
We played practical jokes sometimes on each other, and Dean was a big kid, big enough to know better that there wasn't any tooth fairy, but he wanted that dime, or stuck a dime under the pillow. Well, he pulled his tooth, and he put it under his pillar. Well, I looked at my pocket, and I didn't have no dime, so I put 2 pennies in under his pillow. He come downstairs the next morning cussing about how tight that tooth fairy was. He just got 2 pennies under his pillar. Well, it got funny to me, and he'd put it back under there every night, and I'd put a penny under his pillar. So I ran out of pennies, and I wrote him IOU. He was big enough to read. Put it under his pillar. He come down to cussing, and I was like, starting to put a tooth under. under his belly.
Did the girls ever play any instruments or do any riding or anything like the boys did?
Well, no, they wanted to be barrel racers, but I never encouraged it much because
Connie and Sid used to sing.
yeah,
They used to sing together.
they harmonized good together. Sid and Connie,
Used to go to churches and sing.
they sung religious songs a lot, and we had a minister up here, and he took them to a lot of different churches. They were good singers. As far as Connie's got an outstanding voice, if you could get her to sing, but she's a little backward about singing. But I think she's got the best voice of every one of my kids. Stub is pretty good. He sings pretty good.
Yeah, he sings on the Ball Knobber show down there.
Yeah,
He's
he's
good.
been
Well,
a comedian all of his life.
I know. I know the two boys better than I do the others. I know Dean and Stub better than I do the others, and they're good men.
Yeah,
They're good men.
yeah.
You raised.
They growed up to be pretty good boys.
Yeah, they did.
Oh well, I'm proud of the whole family.
Well,
as far
sure.
as that's concerned, no problems. You know, it makes a better life if you can have kids that honors you, respects you, and I never had no problem of making them mine. Now, they thought, my girls especially, said I was so mean that their boyfriends wouldn't come to the house to get them, but I just had rules for them to go by, and they did.
Well, now they all pretty well respect you, and that makes pretty good. That's something for a guy to be proud of. When he's got his kids, he knows they respect him,
Right.
and they do. I know that.
Get sick, and here they come.
Yeah, that's right.
Dean said he didn't think I used to know anything. I said since he had a family, he said I saw how much smarter I'd go.
Yeah, yeah. That's what I always said. I said when I was about 14, 15 years old, my dad was the dumbest man I believe I ever knew. And when I got married and got a kid or two of my own, he'd smartened up a lot. I always remember that. Yeah.
I had two grandsons after I got kind of crippled up, and I had 50, 60 brood sows. And I'd haul feed in by the ton, 2 ton to the pickup load. And they'd come up, and they was big enough, both of them, that they could drag a 50-pound sack of feed before I could reach it. So they'd help me unload, and then I'd give them a quarter apiece. One of them, he was about 4 years old, and the other one was gone somewhere. And he come up, and I just like 2 or 3 sacks being unloaded. He drug 2 or 3 sacks up the back end, and he stood there and looked at me quite a while, and he said, "Ain't you forgot something?" I said, "What?" He said, "You didn't pay me." I said, "Okay." I felt in my pocket, and I got 2 pennies. And I handed them out to him, and I'd been giving him a quarter. He looked at him, and he'd look at me. He said, "That sure ain't much." I said, "Well, it's this way, you didn't do much." I said, "I just pay a fella kind of according to what he does." He said, "It sure ain't much anyway." So down to the house he went. He just swelled up like a powder pigeon. He wanted that quarter. Away he went, and he got plumb down to his house and on the porch, and he hollered back, said, "Sure wasn't much."
Who was that?
Connie's youngest boy. Philip. Yeah, but you miss out if you don't play with your grandchildren.
Yeah.
You know, or even your children. Well, you miss a lot.
Oh yeah. You miss.
Sometimes people think they don't have time, but you better take time.
You better take some time.
Yeah, because it's the enjoyment of your life when you look back on it. Well, when Brother come in here from California, and I had this good roping horse, this little brown horse out of Texas, and we was practicing down there, just for practice.
Where was this at?
At my home. I had a practice arena at my home. And he'd come in here from California, and so we got, he's taking moving pictures of us roping, practicing roping. And we got him to rope one. Well, he said, Herb, I've not been on a horse in 19 years. I don't know if I could ride him out of there or not. I said, well, of course you can. Bragged him up good, you know. Well, here he come. Well, the brake on that little horse, when that loop went by his eye, he said his brake, you know. I kind of figured what had happened. Here he come, winding that rope up in her left-handed. When he threw that rope, that little horse says brake, and over his head he went, you know. His wife, of course, the arena was soft and it didn't hurt him, but his wife got quite a kick when they got these films developed. Well, she'd show him falling off, and then she'd reverse the film, show him jumping back up and saddled. You know? He wanted to cut that part out, but she never would let him. But I'm going to send to California. I don't have any pictures of that little horse, and he's got a film, and I think they can put that film on tape. And I'm going to send out there and have him put it on tape and send it to me. And then I want you to see what a good horse he was.
Well, you let me know, because I want. Did you after you kind of got your family up started and so on, did you work outside on another job? Did you work other jobs?
Yeah, I worked construction work a good deal of the time. I helped build these super highways. I worked on I-44 from Mount Vernon to the other side of Lebanon. They built her plumb across. But for a good many years, I worked. I had a trade known as a grade checker. I set the grade on these super highways for the machinery to cut the grade to. I took the numbers off of the surveyor stakes and figured out where the road bed, what level it should be on, and the curves and that stuff.
That's pretty much a specialized field, isn't it? A grade setter?
Yeah, it is. You have to be good with numbers and figure the elevation and the material that goes in the road. You have to know how much base rock and how much concrete and the steel and the whole works, and the fill and the cuts. Well, you have to do the figuring to bring it up to snuff. Of course, you've got your supervisors there. If you make a mistake, they'll sure tell you about it.
Yeah.
You know. But I worked for Menifee Construction Company, and for quite a long while. And when I got crippled up some to where I couldn't work on the job, and they wanted me to come to Branson when they put 65 through there. But they called me several different times. And one fellow that he was rechanneling Wilson Creek through Springfield, he said, Herb will roll you in a wheelbar if you'll come and sight it through for me. But I got crippled up to where I couldn't make a hand, so I quit.
How long did it take to run that highway from Mount Vernon to Lebanon on I-44?
Well, it took several years. They'd take 10 and 12 miles to the whack. The last job I worked on was 6 miles the other side of Lebanon on I-44. And then the boys wanted me to go to Branson after that, but I didn't feel like I could make good hands, so I didn't go.
Did you work other outside jobs before you went to work with that Menifee Construction?
Yeah, I worked for different companies. I worked for Leeball, Hallett Paving Company, Cost Paving Company. I pulled steel for Hallett, laid that wall webbing. Yeah. They gave me the right kind of a helper. They're pulling that steel. You had to wade that wet cement and lay that. I think it was 12 feet wide and 18 foot long. And you pulled it off a cart and dropped it in that wet cement. And then they put another layer of concrete on top of that. Well, they gave me a colored man for a helper, Leroy Gray. And he wasn't an educated man. And he was across the steel kind of, and that inspector said, shape him up or shape him out. Said, I won't have that crooked steel. And the foreman told me, said, Herb, help him a little. He tried. I said, man, I couldn't. I said, I've got a stud job here. That's all I can do. So I told Leroy, I liked him, and I said, Leroy, pull your steel and let it lay just like mine. 4 inches in the center gap. And I said, put it just even as mine, and we've got it made. Or I said, they're going to run you over. Well, the foreman come back up and I said, boy, I said, that colored man's really doing good. And I said, what'd you tell him, Herb? I said, I told him he belonged to Ku Klux Klan. Of course I didn't. So no.
He didn't know what you did, huh?
No, he was a good colored boy. Isom Gideon left Kentucky with a string of thoroughbred horses, and he's going to the Dakotas to one of them rendezvous where the Indians traded furs and the horses and what have you. Well, Isom was kind of an adventurer. He was an Irishman, and he got into that rendezvous, and he traded these horses to this chief for his daughter. Old Eagle Rib, this war chief of the Blackfoot Indian tribe, and he traded this string of thoroughbreds. Well, everybody got drunk, and so him and that girl stole that string of horses that night and headed back for Kentucky. And when the old chief woke up, of course that girl wasn't his no more. You know, he'd traded her for that string of horses, but the horse was his. So he took after old Isom, him, the band of Indians, and they run him plumb to the Missouri River. And the river was full. Well, that girl, she swung off and grabbed that mare's tail, but they rode them horses till they'd give out, and then they'd change saddles and turn him loose, because they knowed sure death was behind them Indians coming. And he was heading for Kentucky in a hurry. Well, they come to that Missouri River, and it is up. But he plunged that stud in, and that girl grabbed that horse's tail and swum that Missouri River. Well, the Indians got there, and they had all their horses, but the two they was riding, so they turned back. And Isom brought her on into Kentucky and married her. She was an awful pretty girl, so my ancestors tell me. And they had a daughter, and she married John Hanson Meadows, which was my great-granddad. And that's how come the story was handed down from mouth to mouth.
So, back in your family, there's some Indian blood back there.
Blackfoot, yeah. My grandmother was a quarter Blackfoot Indian, yeah. Her eyes black as charcoal, yeah. And when my great-grandmother died, Barthena Gideon, they wouldn't let them bury her in the Meadows graveyard on Bull Creek because she's an Indian. See, whites and Indians hated each other. But my granddad, she was his wife, so he took her over on James River, east of Nixie, and buried her in the Gideon graveyard on James River.
Well,
that's history,
yeah.
You know. But he sure was making tracks back for Kentucky.
Well, when you
with
got
old Chief Eagle Rib after.
Well, the time they got there, they'd rounded up about all their horses.
Yeah, they had their horses, all but the two that Isom and his Indian girl was riding. But he told how she just hung on to that horse's tail and let him swim the Mississippi without her riding him.
Now that was your
great-great-grandmother.
Great-great-grandmother.
Right.
Yeah, I remember my great-great-grandfather was in the Civil War, and he lived down west of Bodark down there, and he used to tell me a story about, he was a platoon leader, and he had a couple of men with him, and they had the enemy holed up in an old corn crib, and there was a rail fence out in front of it. So he told these two men, they hunkered down behind this rail fence, and he said, now, when these men run out of that corn crib, said, "You take the first two, and I'll get the highness man." And when I was a little kid, I always used to go down there and I'd get up on his lap and I'd say, "Grandpa, tell me about the highness man."
Yeah. The chief eagle rib, which was Isom Milton, or Isom Gideon's wife's father. His hunting ground that he claimed there in the Dakotas was a 3-day ride in any direction from his lodge on a fast horse. And if he caught you crossing his hunting ground, your scalp hung on his tippy and he'd eat your dog if you didn't watch it. If you had one to follow you, you know.
Wow.
Yeah, he was a war chief of the Blackfoot tribe in the Dakotas. Yeah. And
wonder what years those were.
that was back during the Civil War years.
Civil War years.
Yeah, whenever they in 18 and well before that I expect in the 50s, 1850s, I think. When
No.
they'd have them big rendezvous and they'd trade furs for goods and jewels and horses especially, and a good running horse like those Kentucky thoroughbreds brought an outstanding price. The Indian would give a lot for a fast horse, you bet. And so the chief, he traded his daughter for this string of horses. She was a beautiful girl.
Where did they go back to in Kentucky?
I don't know for sure just where the Gideons lived there in Kentucky. I could look it up. I've got a history book in here of where they originated from there in Kentucky. But I used to like to listen to them tell. There was an old man lived down here on the creek by the name of Sig Gideon. He was a little related. And he'd tell about those big timber rattlers, you know, finding them and what a fight they'd put up trying to kill them with a fence rail, you know. So he killed one once, had 21 rattlers on him.
That's a big snake.
Yeah. He told about a feud they had in Kentucky. And he said his granddad and two of his great uncles said they killed all the Gideons down to these 3 men. And said they just one left on the other side. And said he jumped a horse and left the country. And so they drawed straws to see which one go kill him. In those feuds back in that damn town, they killed them by the name to where they couldn't reproduce the name. They killed them all if they could. Well, he left out. And they drawed straws to see which one would go kill him. Well, he jumped a horse and headed for California. That was during the gold rush in 49 in California. And said he was gone almost a year, and he come back and said, well, he's dead. They said, did you kill him? He said, no, he got killed in a saloon brawl about 2 weeks before I got there. But said, I seen his tombstone. He's dead. So he had rode a horse from Kentucky to California.
And got satisfaction anyway.
Yeah, to see that he was gone.
No. The history of who?
Huh?
The history of who what?
Alf Bolin.
Alf Bolin.
Yeah.
Okay.
He was a Southern sympathizer. Said he killed 19 Union men right over here at Roanoke in that down west of Highlandville. He lived back in there. Well, they finally went and got him. They finally got enough manpower, and they killed him. Now this is true in history. And they cut his head off and threw his body out on a glade down there. They didn't bury him. They hated him. And they brought his head to Ozark and put it on a pole and set the pole on the ground, and it stayed on there for a week. His head on that pole. And some of the church members and Christian people of Ozark went to the court with a petition to take his head down and bury it. That's history.
And that was during the Civil War?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I had two uncles that was in there. A little mean, pretty mean. Anyway, one of them was Jim Comstock, and the other was Dave Titsworth. Well, I read a piece in the Springfield paper that this Ingerthon put in the paper about Alf Bolin killing Dave Titsworth at Shadow Rock at Forsyth, but he didn't, because Dave Titsworth lived to be an old man. His boy Buddy, well, my dad is the same age, and his girl married Jerry Sinkler, and they run a store and post office on Chester Ridge. Lake County knew him well. So Dave Titsworth, he wasn't killed. But they were a rebel camp here on Bow Creek, and they run across the drummer dressed up in a fine suit of clothes.
Now, a drummer back then was a peddler.
Right, you know, a horse and buggy days. So they killed him and packed him into camp, show him what a pretty man they'd found.
Found him a pretty man.
Yeah, dressed up in that fine suit.
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
Well, Jim Comstock, he stayed with my dad. He was his uncle. And he stayed with my dad after the Civil War for a while. He was getting old. And he said that they had a horse shot out from under him and Dave run together. And said, over here about Torrey, well, there's a bunch of Southern soldiers come in there and was eating supper, and they had their horses faced to a picket line in one guard. And said Dave slipped in among them horses and said he waited till he seen Dave. Said he untied a big Kentucky thoroughbred stud out of some officer's horse, probably, he said, off of this picket line. And about the time he started to put the bits in his mouth, this guard seen him and started shooting at him, and said he come out of there, but said I whirled and left. And said I come over that hill by Spokane, right down Camp Creek, and said running my horse as much as he could stand, and said I got away in there towards Bull Creek. Said I heard a terrible racket behind me, and said here come Dave on that big stud. Said he's riding down pawpaw brush big as your arms. He'd flat coming down the creek.
He's coming on now.
Said they went on to the Meadows graveyard and slept that night in the Meadows graveyard. They didn't think they'd look for him in the graveyard. Yeah.
Well, I've enjoyed the conversation with you this morning.
Well, I enjoyed visiting.
And we've got this on tape, and I hope that and they will. Your grandkids and your great grandkids and your great great grandkids will listen to this and kind of picture you sitting here telling about these kind of stories. And I know they're interesting stories, and sitting here visiting with you, the pleasure's all been mine.
Well,
you're a good friend. You're a good friend, and I'm glad that we ran across one another when we did.
Yeah, me too. You bet.
I've enjoyed your company, but I hope that all your kids and so on enjoy this tape. So I'm going to shut it down. You're probably getting a little bit tired talking to me.
Things happened in our lifetime that they'll never see.
That's right.
You know.
Yeah. Just
we can remember when we'd run 100 yards to see a car go by. Cars were scarce.
Yeah.
In our time. What if the change in the next 70 years as much as the last 70?
Yeah. See, you'd take trips maybe to Ozark, and there'll be a day coming when some of your ancestors will be running up the moon for a weekend.
It's possible.
And they may listen to this tape sometime when you're telling about having to go to town in riding a horse, one that you had broke, and so on. And someday, things are going to change, and they can't picture you and I sitting here in these old jeans and overalls and
telling the things gone by.
Visiting a little bit.
a treat when I was a small boy was to get to go to town. You know, the streets of Ozark wasn't paved. They had a livery stable behind where the MFA is now. You could stall your horses and feed them for a dime.
For a dime?
Yeah, bundle of oats for a dime. At Chadwick, they had a livery stable there. You could buy a bundle of oats for a dime, or a bundle of oats for $1 and a dime. The one that cost $1 and a dime had a pint of whiskey in it, you know. But the streets of Ozark, and when they cut that, you know that they call it the Hollandville Hill that goes north into Ozark. Well, you notice that other road up on the bank above that. I went back up there one time when I was there at Ozark, and they built that hill road there with horses. Big horses, big perching horses. And then slips and plows and what have you, cut that hill down. Well, I went to town with my folks, and I was probably 8 or 10 years old, and I asked my mother if I could go back up there and watch them big horses pull. I'd never seen anything quite like that. You know, just cutting that dirt hill down with horsepower.
Took lots of shovels of dirt, didn't it?
Emmett Kerr's daddy owned the construction company. He deeded it to Emmett when he got too old to mess with it, the Kerr Construction Company, and Emmett traded it for a gold mine that was salted, and so he come out broke.
Yeah, there's been a lot of that done back then.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to shut this thing off, and whatever's left on the end of it, somebody else can put wherever they want to on it. But
all right.
I've enjoyed the visit with
I've
you
enjoyed
too.
it, Michael.
So
there's some history to it, and